Sorry, guys. I'm so bad at this. All right, I'm back on. Okay. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today we're coming together for our Digital Foundations for Social Startups. This is an event that we've been really excited to put on for our members because we've been fans of Zentient for a long time and we've known of these guys for a long time, and they are really, really, really great in this space and really helpful. And I think we're probably all on a bit of a similar level where we are all running our own businesses on quite small teams and are all quite new to the things that we need to do in terms of our IT and safety in our systems. So this is definitely something that WASEC will be benefiting from. And we're very thankful for Stephen to coming on and presenting for us today. So thank you. I'll just start off with acknowledgement of country. So I want to acknowledge that I'm on Noongar Boodja country, dialing in from Walyup, and I want to acknowledge the elders past and present. And I did get a really interesting email today, so I thought I might share that to give some more, beef to my acknowledgement of country. But it's the beginning of winter and we get absolutely slammed with rain. And my favorite fact about this time of year is so we're entering the new season of the rainy season. It's called Makaru, which is a season of fertility, which is really sweet. And it's a lot of animal pairing times of year. So you're seeing a lot of animals start behaving differently. And my favorite thing about this time of year is that the ravens or the crows are all starting to mate up and pair. And that means they're going to stop making that really awful crowing noise for a little bit, which is really good news for us all. But I think that's very sweet. So they're going to stop going, finally, because I am cursed by lots of crows in my life, although I love them. So it's a great time for bird watching if that's anyone's cup of tea. And welcome to Makaru, the rainy season. So thanks everyone for joining us on the call today. There's a few of us on the call we've met before and have come to some WASEC events, and there's a few people who are new. And if you'd like to jump on, say hello, and introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful. And you also don't have to if your microphone isn't working or if you don't want to say good day. But we've got a small group on the call today. So it might be nice to say hello. For myself, my name is Rosie. I'm the membership coordinator at WASEC. I've been at WASEC for about a year now, and I'm pretty new to IT. So I'm interested in hearing about what's going to be in the workshop today. And yeah, maybe we're going to introduce Stephen a bit more officially later, but do you want to say g'day next, Stephen?
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah. Hi, I'm Stephen. I've been working with social enterprises for a few years now. It's been great to be a part of WASEC and to see the energy that Rosie and Olivia and the team have been bringing in. I think it's really encouraging to see all the social enterprises we can connect with, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you all today.
Thank you. If anyone wants to jump in and say g'day, say where you're dialing in from and anything you'd like to get out of today's session, feel free to jump in.
Hi, I'm Jodie. I have actually just come across you guys through my son who's studying at UWA, who someone tipped him off about Zentient, and it's led me to this path because interestingly enough, I actually support non-profit organisations here in WA, get started on Salesforce, which is a pretty well-known CRM. But what goes hand in hand with that is usually in this instance where IT knowledge is fairly minimal with, not many resources to support them. So I usually cover that stuff with them as well. But I was just really interested into what this workshop was going to cover at that sort of level for this size organisations.
Thank you, Jodie. It's awesome. Great to meet you as well. Hi, Olivia.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Nat. I'm from Dress for Success. I'm so sorry, but I cannot get my camera to work.
No worries.
I am really quite IT deficient, and I have a small team, and no one has a real strength in it. So I'm here to just see what I can grab from it, really.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Awesome.
My name's Peter, and yeah, I said hi before, but I think I'll get a little jump in here. So I've got a tech startup called Go Community Cards. It's a gratitude opportunity community where the theme is sending gratitude cards to friends, family, clients, colleagues, and the sale of the card goes to a charity, not-for-profit, community cause. And yeah, so just trying to spread love around the world. And I've got some clue about tech, but being a tech startup, I am absorbing as much as possible because the little things make a big difference. So thank you for putting this on.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
I might jump in briefly. So Jackie Swindler, I've just joined WASEC about a month ago, so new to the team. Really pleased to be part of the team. Digitally, I know enough to know that there's always more things to know, particularly in this day and age of AI and everything. So yeah, keen to see how we go.
Thank you. Cool. If anyone else wants to say hi, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I might get into a bit of housekeeping for today. So we are recording this session. So our video is being recorded. So just bear that in mind. If there's anything that you're uncomfortable with being shared later, let me know and I can always remove it. And we're going to upload this video probably to WASEC's website so people can access it later. This event is designed for social enterprises that are usually quite busy and time poor. So most of our events we do upload onto our website so people can rewatch it later in their own time. We're also going to be recording sort of the key takeaways from this event and uploading that onto Understory, which is a national platform for social enterprise capacity building. So today's event is partially funded by a SEDI grant that WASEC has secured. So we also will be producing some resources from today that we will share out with the attendees. And I might get on to introducing Stephen from Zentient. So Stephen's the director and co-founder of Zentient and describes himself as a digicultural architect, which is a cool term, and a human-centered technologist. He's got a background in psychology and economics, which probably has been very helpful. Zentient's mission is to make every IT-related task easier for mission-driven teams, and they've been operating for about 3 years in Perth and are doing a lot of things that Stephen will tell you more about, including a recent hackathon that you won that I think is really cool. But I'll leave it to Stephen to introduce himself and Zentient more, and we'll get started with your presentation. So I'll stop sharing my screen as well now, Stephen.
Perfect. Thanks, Rosie. Let me just share that screen. Great. We can all see that screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for introducing me, Rosie. I'll just get started on the presentation, then I'll take a second to just introduce myself and Zentient and what we do in a sec. So just with today's presentation, it's a privilege to be here with you and to be invited by WASEC to present on digital foundations for social startups. Today's presentation, I'm keen to get a bit of input on what you guys hope to cover and focus on, but we'll be looking at more of an introduction and where we're going, digital culture and what that means, core technology for every social enterprise or every business that's starting up, a few discussions on security, because I know cyber is on the mind of quite a few people and quite a few organizations. I know CRMs has also been raised quite a bit, so we'll discuss that there. And I think Jody could actually contribute there as well, because I think there's some good information in this space. And then perhaps more of a Q&A at the end if we do have questions. So we are here till about 11:30ish. So I think the main presentation will be about 45, 60 minutes worth of content, depending on what we want to focus on. And then there'll be space and time at the end for questions and answers there. So Rosie has acknowledged country. I'd like to also acknowledge a country that I'm meeting on, which is Wajak Budja from the Noongar Nation. I think this week being Reconciliation Week, and I think as I was drafting this presentation, one thought that came to mind for me as well was, what does knowledge mean in the space? What does being right mean in the space? I think the context as well, as I was also working with the team last week, just introducing to different AI chatbots and how AI can be used. And I think I was reflecting then on the data and information we have and what's presented in unis, what's presented today, what's presented and actually captured by AI tools is actually a lot of Western knowledge. I think it's data that's trained on what is true from a Western sense, if we think about the internet being scraped for these AI tools, it's a very Eurocentric, very American-centric internet that we live in, which is more men post on the internet. It's hyper-represented by Europeans and Americans. It's the knowledge that is stored within other cultures. And when we're talking about Indigenous cultures here in Australia, that is not often captured on the internet or is not well represented on the internet. And I think that's something I want to keep in mind as we present what knowledge is today and as we look at technology, and AI being one example there. In terms of Zentient and what I do, we're a social enterprise. We were co-founded alongside James, my co-founder, who couldn't make it today. He's off gallivanting in Europe at the moment on his break. We were co-founded 3 or 4 years ago. We work quite exclusively with non-for-profits, but we do branch out to more purposeful ventures and social enterprises who are not strictly ACNC registered. We assist with tech, but I think where we differentiate ourselves is that we're looking more at the culture around tech. So for my background, as Rosie introduced, I come from an economics and psychology background. I did my economics degree first, but then I worked for 3 years in management consulting with a tech focus, working with some big companies here in Perth to work on data science and improving their tech stack. And I think for me, after doing that for about 3 years, I lacked connection to my community. I lacked purpose. I lacked the social impact I was hoping for. So for me, I met James and I was like, hey, how about we actually start our own social enterprise where we can be more about social impact. But I think alongside that, something I also thought that was missing in tech consulting was the people aspect. So I actually did my post-grad psych whilst I was co-founding Zentient, whilst I've been co-founding Zentient, because I think tech, we can talk about tools and we can talk about tech here, but if we neglect the people that make up these organizations, that make up our organizations, then the tech's for nothing. So when we're talking about digital cultures, we're talking about the people that make the tech possible. And I think that will be a big part of today's presentation, because I could talk about all the tech tools that we have, and I will give an introduction to those, but I think it's good to understand the cultures that you'll be creating within your teams and within your organizations as you grow and build. So I know we've introduced ourselves very briefly, but if anyone would like to contribute as well, I am actually quite keen to hear about what you're hoping to get out of this workshop. I know, Jody, you bring your experience. I know Natch have mentioned that there's perhaps a limited tech expertise in your team, that Peter, you have some knowledge there, and that you are building a tech organization, or it's a tech startup. So I'm just keen to hear perhaps what you guys are hoping to get out of this workshop. What does success look like if you walk away from this workshop?
One golden nugget. Thank you, Stephen.
One golden nugget. Cool.
Maybe 2 if I'm lucky, but I set the bar low, and I'm apologies. I didn't do a lot of research on you and what you provide. So yeah, happy to accept.
What are some challenges you're facing, Peter, if I may ask? Is it a bit of everything being a startup founder?
Oh yeah, I got a dev of one who's lovely, but is under pressure by me, making him complete the tasks. And so that's a real challenge. And just being nice all the time to someone that's frustrating you is a challenge. But we are a team. And what is time? So yeah, I'm kind of dancing between like getting information and trying to find the route to goal, and doing it in a way that makes people feel seen, wanted, and part of the team. Yeah, it's
awesome.
Challenging, but it's part of the game. It's good.
I get that, especially for those young enterprises there, Peter. Thanks for sharing.
Stephen, I just wanted to share with you, a lot of the nonprofits that I work with seem to have a like a very vacant space when it comes to an IT representative. So
Exactly.
some sort of, I would say, small to medium-sized charities where, they definitely have 20+ employees and may have an outsourced IT team for more of the help desk stuff.
Yes.
But there's no one really present with the sort of security risk analysis or, housekeeping per se of like password, not being, the postcode and whatever. There,
That's
it's
exactly
just,
it.
yeah. So typically in your experience over the last few years, what do they do? Because I just find that that's quite a major gap at the moment that I
Yes.
physically see. So I'd be really
Yeah.
keen to hear your stories.
Perfect. No, thanks, Jody. That's really helpful. And I love talking about that space. So I'm glad there's someone else who's actually in this space as well and can resonate with a lot of these ideas, because passwords is definitely it.
Hi there. I think from my perspective at WASEC, I'd love to learn a bit more about online or digital safety, or just ways to make
Yes.
sure safeguarding our data and systems.
Perfect.
Any tips you have, that would be amazing. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rosie.
I said I'd be quiet today. I'm a bit sick. I can't help myself. I was thinking that it would be really cool. We work with a lot of small and emerging organizations and startups, and a bit to what you were saying, Jodie and Peter, like what I see it a lot, like people are so busy and they're so overwhelmed, and the technology should help, not hinder what they do. So like what is like one or two ways of, or bits of tech that we could maybe promote or guide our members through to help make their lives a lot easier? Like we do it, we have the same issue ourselves. We're like totally overwhelmed with what we have to do as a small team, and with a new CRM and all that. So it feels to me like technology, there should be a piece of technology that should help these emerging startups rather than making life difficult. So love to hear some insights on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia.
We've got a couple messages from Giles as well, who wanted, whose feedback was he's looking at simple website options, building a website, and any comments around how to use AI for our social enterprises.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. Awesome. What's that? Great. Anything I would add to that? I think perhaps something, just coming back a slide in introducing myself, I think Jodie reminds me of, like, I think we haven't mentioned that when we work alongside non-for-profits and social enterprises, it's also important that James and I recognize we are a social enterprise ourselves, and we've gone along this journey. So we have that lived experience, not only with helping other non-for-profits, but also being a social enterprise ourselves. And I think that puts us in a unique position, because I think where other consultants might come join a consultancy and be working with an already established firm, we've been there and done that for a lot of these projects. We've evaluated CRMs, we've evaluated websites, we've looked at the different options that work for us, options that work for clients. And I think Jodie mentions an interesting one there on the password management, because we see that quite often, and we'll go into that later on. But I think James and I also, I hate the word entrepreneurs, but we are absolute sticklers for building new ideas and not just settling with Zentient. I think Rosie touched on it there. We did a tech hackathon with Brightwater last month, where we're building a newspaper that's actually got AI generated content in there, but also connects to family members, so that people who can't access tech can actually access it in more accessible ways. More relating to Zentient, we've actually just recently, last month, been rolling out our new app, which was funded by the WA state government, which actually helps non-for-profits with password management, as well as digital maturity checks, as well as skills capturing. And the last one there, the module we want to release, is knowledge basing. So where do you go within the team, as well as ticketing, to help support that? But I'm not going to spend too much time on that, because that's not the point of this presentation. But my point is that we actually have quite a few touch points within non-for-profits and social enterprises in the space, and actually we're building purpose-built apps to try support the space as well. for free, because that's our mission. So just an overview, because I know there's different areas when it comes to tech. I think it's good to just overview for a moment what the business systems are to get a big picture of thinking. This could be one of the start small with our core, but I will warn you, this does get messy, and I do apologize for that. It's probably one of the messiest slides I've built, just because there is so much when it comes to the business systems and where tech can kind of spread its tentacles throughout the organization. So if we look at our core, we have our email, our calendars, our files, devices. If you get more advanced as a social enterprise, you look at help desk, where do people go? Jody touched on that before. Maybe that's a managed service provider, an external IT provider who you go to once you've hit that maybe 5 to 10 full-time employees. Maybe you already have one where they kind of set up your Microsoft environment, and that's like where your questions are. What do backups look like? What does collaboration look like, whether you're using Teams or whether you're using Slack? What does your knowledge base look like with your wiki? What does task management look like? So those are your core functionalities within your business. And I think one important one there as well is identity. But we'll come back to that, because I think that becomes quite important for cybersecurity, is when you have that identity within the core of your business, is understanding, yes, Rosie at wesec.org is actually Rosie, that I know it's not someone else impersonating Rosie, that identity when it comes to accessing other applications becomes quite powerful there. We have also within our operational side of things is our finance and admin. So we have apps around Xero, we have payroll apps, we have expense apps, procurement, budgeting. We may have apps to do with governance, and apps and ideas to do with governance, risk, and compliance. So passwords, data privacy. What does security look like? Again, as you become a bigger organization, what does engaging with the board look like? We then have our data, how we're storing that data, how we're reporting on that data, how we're communicating that data. Then once we've done with operations, we're more looking as a social enterprise, how we engage our community. So that might be through a CRM to support us, but we'll look at donor management, member management, HR and volunteer rostering, partner and grantor tracking. We'll also look at our marketing and outreach. We have our website, email marketing, social media. And then as we move past engaging, we're then thinking about actual delivery. So what does our learning management system look like? What does collecting data in the field look like? How are we actually delivering these projects, and what tools are we using? Through to fundraising and revenue, whether that's e-commerce, peer-to-peer, collections, recurring giving, donations pages, payment processing, all those different techs supporting that. So that's how we look from left to right. We're looking at our operations, we have our engagement, and then we have our delivery. But also what glues these things together is perhaps integration and automation. So for example, how do your emails integrate with, if you get an email from a donor, how does that integrate with your relationship management? If you have an e-commerce or a donation, how does that actually get captured in your CRM? If you have some data from this e-commerce, if you've made some sales, or if you've captured some donations, how you're reporting on that. So all of these different areas actually need to communicate to each other, whether that's through an integration platform such as Zapier, whether that's through APIs that you're building, whether it's through low-code tools. AI and machine learning actually can help in this space as well, and then perhaps mobile apps. So I think as we build our businesses, as we build our social enterprises, there is a risk that we kind of have these tools. Perhaps we have a tool specifically for finance, but we have a specific tool for our e-commerce, we have a specific tool for our website. But if they're not integrating and working well together, you end up with these silos where you then have to open different apps. You need to open Shopify to understand, yes, Rosie made a purchase, but then did Rosie actually donate to us? Or maybe that's in another app. And then actually, I'm pretty sure Rosie attended an event. Okay, that's in Humanitics. Okay, but I'm pretty sure Rosie is actually a volunteer as well. And then that's in a different app. So how are these apps actually communicating together? Where's your central source of truth? And I think whilst this integration and automation is the glue that holds these together, what's really crucial for us and what we've been finding is that digital culture is actually the people within your organization and how you're using these tools and what the mindset is as you build your organization, that it's thinking about innovative ways around your processes. It's being data driven, it's collaborating, it's being really mindful about the customer and the customer experience here. It's strategizing. It's a number of different things. For us, digital culture, as we'll explore in the following slides, really is the backbone of the organization, because you can have whatever tool you want up here. You can get the best and strongest and the most well set up Salesforce CRM. But if you aren't paying attention to the people within your organization and their digital skills and how they're comfortable with the tool, then it's all for nothing. So digital culture is important, and I think it's worth actually first understanding why it's important. So I think, again, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds and make this a business presentation, but I think it's important to understand on our axes and how we kind of see things is that you have traditional businesses, our traditional for-profit entities being more on the right, where they may incorporate social responsibility, especially for marketing purposes, but there's some idea of social responsibility there. Whereas traditionally on the right, you may have your traditional not-for-profit that's more reliant on a grant or donations. What we've found over time is that there is more of a social pressure here that's pushing businesses to become more socially responsible. But also there's a push from traditional non-for-profits to operate more in a social enterprise way, that there's a strive for financial stability, sustainability. And this is often driven by the funding model changes. So no longer is it just getting a lump sum from the government or the grantors actually want to see results. They actually want to see impact measurement, that grants and funding may actually be tied to outcomes. But there's also that stakeholder reporting pressure. So I think in some of the non-for-profits we work with, one non-for-profit we work with is Lifeline WA. And I love using Lifeline WA as an example of a well-known not-for-profit, but actually a not-for-profit that wins awards in the not-for-profit space, but also in the business space. So I think they won the Telstra Business Award, if I remember the award correctly, a few years ago. And as they won that non-for-profit award, I noticed they also won the Best Business Award, or Best Business within their category of revenue. And it made me think about, actually, to me, the best non-for-profits are the ones that are operating like businesses, that aren't treating profits as evil, but are actually becoming more self-sustaining not-for-profits. So as we look towards the funding of our enterprises, it's actually thinking about the mix between our social responsibility and financial sustainability, because we see too many social enterprises fail because they may be too focused on one or the other. And it's that flex or that merge between the two that becomes crucial. So digital culture is important as well. We're seeing lower donor numbers, we're seeing lower volunteer numbers, and we're seeing a lot of social enterprises and not-for-profits unable to meet demand. So obviously, we need to do more good with less, and obviously, that may be something that technology can help with. And I think there's a big gap in the experience that I've worked with in the beginning of my career with for-profit entities, and when it comes to non-for-profit entities, is that there's a huge gap in the tech that may be being used, and the mindset around tech and the hiring around tech, and just almost every tech area just seems to be not invested in, or not understood, or not appreciated for the help that it can bring. So there are challenges to run this. So there's challenges with getting started. There's struggles around recruiting for the right tech skills, not knowing where to start. It often becomes reliant on outsiders. I think Jody mentioned there that reliance on managed service providers, that IT provider, and what does that look like? Are they just there to patch a few holes, or are they there to actually help you think strategically? And then progress within this space is often made with one-off projects. So if we think about how it starts out, it's often the social enterprises are started by someone who's passionate by or affected by an issue. There's often that lack of technology expertise. I myself don't come from a deep area of tech expertise. I'm lucky that my co-founder is a computer scientist, but we see that a lot of times within social enterprises where there is that lack of expertise in tech. And often they're run on quite basic spreadsheets, or you're trying to get together some grants or some free licenses here and there to try patchwork together some free software. But then the problem with those free softwares is that the integrations often are hidden behind paywalls or behind expensive subscriptions, and then you're having data silos where these apps are not talking to each other. So a question to the group here is, what number of employees do you think someone with tech skills is typically hired when it comes to hiring within social enterprises or within non-for-profits?
We've got 6 and none yet, so it's definitely post
6 and none
6 for me.
Post 6 and that. 50. That is a great answer there, Jackie, because that's what we're seeing exactly in our experience. It's typically a non-for-profit will hire more than 50 people before they hire their first tech employee. This is anecdotal, that there's no evidence that
I
there's
can
no
probably
research behind
vouch
us.
for that. I'm
Thank you,
seeing,
Jody.
yeah, I'm seeing a couple of organizations I work with. They're at the 20 plus with no
Yeah.
IT in-house.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It's whether you're measuring that by full-time employees, you're measuring that by revenue. It's astonishing to think about just the size of these non-for-profits where there is no dedicated tech support, and often that comes under a CFO. The IT comes under a CFO. Sometimes it comes under your operations manager, but there is no real tech person within the organization. I think the one exception I've come across is perhaps Brightwater, but they're about a $200 and something million revenue organization, and I think at that stage they're operating almost like a traditional business in many senses. So again, coming back to that question of why aren't tech employees hired? So there's that question of not knowing what role to hire for. Am I going to get someone who might be specialized in building and managing my CRM? Am I going to get someone who's a really good website developer? Am I going to get a generalist who kind of knows a bit of everything, but not too deep on anything? The external pressure, so the wages within non-for-profits may not be competitive, especially within the tech space. There's the internal pressures, that opportunity cost. If we are going to spend so much money on a tech person, but what about the other people we could hire? What about our programs? There's often big competition for funding internally, and then the competitive labor market there as well. And that competitive labor market, where we see it in the non-for-profit space, is that inability to afford and justify high wages. So we're underemploying, but then within the for-profit space is that higher wages are paid to employees, but then tends to be overpaying for a skill set that's quite in demand at the moment. So where do they go first for the tech skills and advice? I think Jody answered this one earlier, is that managed service provider. Does anyone else have any, where would anyone else go for tech skills and advice? Is it just those MSPs? Is it just that IT provider, that local person who kind of sets up your Microsoft?
Maybe universities as well.
Maybe universities. So there's some consulting clubs there as well. 180 Degrees, Walk. There's a few others there as well who help with that. YouTube, I like that. YouTube, the internet has a lot of valid resources. I think more and more people with validity are turning to AI as well, and having a conversation with AI. How do I set this up? How do I set that up? But yeah, that first point of call tends to be that managed service provider, and that MSP will often look after their Microsoft 365, for example. That tends to be what they set up, and provide general assistance with IT related issues. Now, where this doesn't become a good idea is where these MSPs operate on that break-fix model. They expect you to raise a ticket when something isn't quite working. So there's almost that perverse incentive to never truly address the underlying issues, because the more that breaks, the more that you're calling them up for that. Often the MSPs will be linked to, will have partner programs with Microsoft or whatever organization and tech tool they want to implement. So there may be that kickbacks there. And often there's building that dependence. MSPs rarely have strategy or rarely offer strategic services, and are rarely thinking about how can we build your business and make you self-sufficient, because naturally that's not really in their self-interest. So where do organizations turn for capacity building tech transformation projects? Often it's consultants. So sometimes organizations will decide what they need. For example, that might be a new website, and go straight to the vendor. And what we find is that this almost always ends badly, because what that is driven by is often this idea of, oh, we need a website, everyone's got a website, or oh, we need a CRM, everyone's got a CRM. But there's a lack of actually evaluating the needs internally, understanding the capabilities within the team, because you could pay the money to get the website, you may pay the money to get the CRM, but what's lacking often is that handover and that training. What are the tech skills internally when it comes to this? Sometimes there is that strategy consulting from consultants, but yeah, it's often just project-based, and there tends to be less of a blueprint as to the bigger picture and just doing one-off projects to solve smaller things. So here again, we're just looking at what makes it difficult. The consultancy doesn't often understand the entire business. It lacks that intimate knowledge there. That integration is rarely considered. And yeah, I think that maintenance that we touched on there as well is you can build a really great CRM, you can build a really great website, but if something goes wrong, who are you contacting there at the end of the day? And what we found in our experience is that when tech projects do succeed, whether it's by us or a different vendor, it's often because the organization already has a strong foundation. They already have that digital mindset when it comes to the space. And when you don't have that foundation to manage a tool, another project just adds more clutter to the digital ecosystem. So what we found within working for not-for-profits and social enterprises is that we should be focusing on digital capability, not capacity. We should be looking at digital culture instead of digital transformation, that we should focus on the training and how people are using the tools, less so on the tools themselves. And then we're aiming for self-sufficiency, is not being reliant on consultants, not being reliant on managed service providers. There are time and places for managed service providers, there are time and places for consultants to come in and perhaps help us think about a blueprint to actually set up a complicated software and perhaps leave it running for the future. But I think that internal building of skills as we build and scale our organizations is really important. So what is digital culture? So digital culture is that ecosystem, it's the people, it's how we interact and how we think about the tech within our organizations. We're not thinking about one project, but actually thinking of more of a system here. And a question to you guys is, what does a mature digital culture feel like? What does it feel like to work in an organization that gets tech right? I think we all have experiences of where tech goes wrong, and it's frustrating when you're on board and not knowing where things are, but what does it feel like when it's actually right?
I have no idea.
No idea.
I think when the whole team understands the tech systems that we've got and how they work together, and they make
I think that's powerful there, Rosie, where it's that mindset, it's understanding, yes, I go to this tool for that functionality, I go to that tool for that functionality, is understanding that what tool is used when, where to get help if I need help, how they link together. There's that seamless integration. So I think one sign for some organizations is that onboarding is effortless. So, that person's entered into the system, an onboarding form automatically goes out, they fill out the form, that automatically comes back into the system instead of this manual process of forms going back and forth. Has it been done correctly? Training is quite seamless. So you might have your wiki or your knowledge base there, but you might also have a buddy system to help on board there. So navigating within the tools is quite simple. And then that digital idea is just on top of everyone's minds. What does that immature digital culture feel like? Natalie, you said you didn't know what a mature one looked like. Do you know what an immature one looks like?
Yeah, really the opposite of what Rosie said. So lack of transparency of the systems and how they integrate as well. I've often found that automation can be both a blessing and a curse. So if there's things that are automated in the background, but nobody knows that they're there, then they can get lost in translation down the track.
Yeah, definitely. That as I think that understanding of how things are working, that's not just this black box where things magically input and output, is super helpful there. So I think a lot of us know what an immature digital culture feels like. There's nothing too new for us here. So what a good digital culture looks like is the immediate benefit of better productivity, and then the ongoing benefit of a better ability to improve with those efficient systems. So just looking at how we measure digital culture, we measure across the different areas and different questions. Our process within Zentient, but I think if you're going to do this internally, it's just having those interviews with individual staffs, workshopping as a group to discuss issues, and only once you've discussed those issues, then thinking about ideas. I think some people arrive at the idea of, again, a website or a CRM first without understanding what the core issues to the organization are and how the idea may solve that. So a basic issue matrix, just again, working with the team, thinking about all the issues that come up, and then perhaps putting it on a matrix. Perhaps with limited use of tech to interact with customers. There's a limited online collaboration. I think some people have mentioned websites. People aren't really finding out about us in efficient ways. So that might be a issue matrix, understanding how painful is that for us and how frequent is that issue. And that from there, thinking about how may we solve those issues, how impactful would it be, how effortful would it be there as well. And just in terms of how that digital culture is built, the tech is the easy part, the people is the hard part. I think this is quite straightforward in the sense, I'm not going to go too deep into this one, just because I want to move on to the other areas of the presentation. But it's just thinking about how do you, especially as you are beginning with your organization, I think Peter almost touched with this to an extent, is what is the culture looking like? What is that relationship, peer-to-peer relationship looking like? What is that connection and collaboration looking like? And then from there, thinking about perhaps the wider organization and then implementing that. I do prefer this one as a way of thinking as well, in terms of the different models we can think about, is ideating solutions, experimenting solutions. So if we're thinking about a website, and one that we may build ourselves, is actually not just thinking, oh, everyone's using Wix, I'm going to go with Wix, is actually experimenting with a few website builders and playing around with what's going to be easy for you to build with, what's going to be easy for you to maintain with, what's easy to integrate with. But we'll come to those questions as we consider things later. So that is the digital culture part of the conversation, because I think that whilst I could have gone directly into tools, I think that very much underpins everything we're going to be talking about as we move into the core tech stack, as we move into security, and as we move into CRMs, is understanding that the people, the culture we build within our organization is really underpins the effectiveness of any tool that we bring in. So this is our map here again of our business systems. We're going to be focusing on the core section here. And the core often starts with getting a Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. It's, what's the word that comes to mind? Alarming, but also understandable to an extent, of social enterprises and new businesses that start up without a Google Workspace or a professional Microsoft 365 environment, because I think this is really, really difficult to get started within this space. Whilst if you're looking at email, calendar, storage, backups, just to begin with, if you weren't to have something like a Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, if you were to use a standard Gmail account, or if you were to use the free versions of that, Google Calendar, perhaps you'd use a personal Google Drive, they don't have the enterprise features that come with the Google Workspace or a Microsoft 365. The collaboration is quite limited. You're then asking people to log in with different email addresses. Just from a more basic point of view, it's already quite hard to connect different applications together. And when we work with not-for-profits, when we work with startups, it's actually saying from day one, invest in Google Workspace or invest in Microsoft 365. And as we come to the end of the presentation, I'll give links on what free Google Workspace looks like for organizations, what free Microsoft 365 looks like for organizations. But to us, this is essential, not just for having email and calendar in one place, the collaboration there, but also for enterprise-grade security around storage, the option for backups. If someone accidentally deletes a file, what does that backup look like? But I think even as we move further down the list, that becomes really, really important as we move into cyber. And when it comes to security, these are enterprise-grade solutions. What we'll also cover in the next few slides is also Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 are hosted on Australian servers, which is really important for data privacy, which will actually become law. I know the bill has been passed. I'm not sure if it takes place this year or next year, but just around client data needs to be stored in appropriate ways and reasonable ways. And one reasonable way is that actually needs to be stored on Australian servers, that actually we can't be using offshore servers for data. So it is a cybersecurity risk as well when that data is being pipelined outside of Australia. That increases the risk of that being intercepted. More as well, we're also talking about encryption of it if we're using free versions of storage, if we're using free versions of calendars, that may not be stored within Australian servers, but also the encryption and the data privacy and the data security may not be as strong as what we're having with enterprise grade Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. These tools also have great collaboration spaces, so Microsoft Teams or Google Chat. They will also have wikis, so whether that's SharePoint, whether that's Google Wiki, Google Sites is what it's called, and then task management. So Microsoft will have Planner, Google will have To Do. They're not robust. Sorry, Google will have Tasks. They're not robust solutions. They're not great task management softwares, but they actually get the job done to begin with. If we want to branch out on these areas, if we want to have a Slack channel, if we want to have a Notion site, if we want to have task management, we can do that with Trello or Asana or Monday, whatever task management software we want. But actually Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 cover the actual core necessities of building a business. And I think it's highly recommended that you don't skip out on the cost, which is often free for AC&C, not-for-profits. When it comes to security, we've already discussed to an extent the identity and authentication. When it comes to security, what's really useful when, sorry, I'm skipping between slides here, is that Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, you set up within an organization. I know within WSEC, I have Olivia, I know I have Rosie, I know I have Jackie. I know that these are WSEC staff. So when it comes to accessing other applications, you can invite team members to that application, whether that's be Asana for your task management, for example, and you know that that is actually the person it is. It makes it easy for you can actually bypass passwords there. So we'll come into passwords for a second, but with apps like Asana, with apps like Trello, you don't actually need to create a new password for them if you have a single sign-on with Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. So if I'm going to use my Zentient email address, it actually just authenticates based on my account rather than me having to actually write in a new password there. So that's where authentication and identity can actually be really powerful from Google Workspace and Microsoft 365. Just in terms of security and data privacy, the question to you guys is, what are you most concerned about in this space? I know, Rosie, you touched on a few things there yourself, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we did. Well, I keep hearing more rumblings about it recently, but there was a member of ours who shared that she had literally had been hacked or something like that, and when they were starting up their business, and they're not on the call today, so I can't share their story, but I think it's like very easy to happen. And password management is something that I know is a quick fix for some of these issues.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's only a matter of time maybe until we have a close call. So
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Rosie. Anyone else? So we've heard about password management being hacked. One point being there.
Sorry, just from my viewpoint, with the whole like working from home situation and people working on their home devices and potentially accessing, well, not just potentially, but will be accessing work content on their home device and just general cyber hygiene. You know, should they be using a VPN potentially?
Yep.
Like, yeah, those kind of tips would be good.
Yeah. I think the direct answer to that one is Google Workspace and Microsoft are almost essential for that one, especially when it comes to the auditing and the admin console capabilities that Workspace and Microsoft 365 provide. I think depending on the organization, depending on what risk tiers they are, and perhaps that's almost a bigger chat, is actually then discussing VPN. So some organizations will insist on having company devices. That is quite a big investment, but that does alleviate a lot of cybersecurity risk. And then they'll also have VPNs to ensure that data is being communicated in a secure and anonymous way, so that's not intercepted as easily. Device management tends to be later stage for social enterprises, as does VPNs in that space, because, you know, as a social enterprise ourselves, we use personal devices, and for us, it's actually ensuring, as you say there, with cyber hygiene, Jody, is actually making sure we separate almost the workspace from the personal space, and ensuring that we're not actually downloading too many files as well, that we're not downloading client data onto our personal computers, that actually we're trying to keep that within that common workspace as much as we can. I've kind of answered a question there, but did anyone else have any other questions they wanted to ask? So what our focus is both on cybersecurity, but also on data privacy. And when it comes to data privacy, our responsibilities include protecting our clients and protecting our mission and trust. If it were to happen that our data is leaked, we lose trust within the organization. But we also have legal liabilities here. We have the Privacy Act, which is, I think, the Privacy Act and the Australian privacy principles are essential reading for all founders. I know there's a lot on our plates. I know we're juggling a lot. And I know it's easy for a lot of innovative people who have all these ideas popping up to actually not think about the compliance aspect. But the compliance is super important here when it comes to responsible handling of our clients' data, of the data of people who are purchasing with us, who are donating to us. The Australian privacy principles, I'm not going to go into the privacy principles now, but it's worth reading that, understanding that. Same with the Privacy Act. I briefly touched on the Privacy Reform Bill, which actually looks at the overseas transmission of data. So that actually we should be having client data stored on Australian servers. The OAIC, the Officer of the Australian Information Commissioner, if I remember correctly, is given guidance on AI, but gives guidance in a number of areas. I think I'm just highlighting this one as an example of we shouldn't be using client data within public AI bots. If we are going to do large language models, if we are going to be using ChatGPT, if we are going to be using Gemini, whether we're using Copilot, whatever your flavor is, I guess, we're making sure that that data is anonymized, that we're actually not putting client information into a public third-party software that we haven't specifically understood how it works, such as ChatGPT. ChatGPT can be super powerful, but their data is being pipelined to Singapore, if I remember correctly. That opens it up to encryption that may be used to train models. It's worth actually properly understanding the vendor terms when it comes to each of these tools. Gemini and Copilot would be different because Copilot, if it's part of your Microsoft 365 subscription, would be on Australian servers and would be actually meeting the same security requirements as your Microsoft 365 environment. So that's very secure, Copilot 365. The same with Gemini, if that's coming into your Google Workspace subscription, that is the same protection and Australian servers. So AI is one example of how we should be responsible with client data. I think we should be responsible with all third-party apps that we use, that we're actually thinking about how are we safeguarding and protecting the client data in an ethical way. So some common threats that we've noticed when it comes to non-for-profits and social enterprises. So we've discussed compromised passwords. Sometimes they're phishing scams, opening some links. There may be ransomware. So applications maliciously installed on the computer that may shut it down if a ransom is not paid, that may lock you out of the computer, may lock out access to certain files. There may be a business email compromise. So what we see happening quite a bit is you receive an email and at the top, it seems like it's coming from Stephen Hodgkin, but actually when you look into the actual email address, it's actually not Stephen Hodgkin. There's actually quite advanced ways that that malicious actors are trying to impersonate other people, impersonate people within your organization. And it trips me up because sometimes I get an email from James Watson and it just looks like James Watson in my inbox. And then it's asking me, hey, Stephen, can you go out and buy 10 iTunes vouchers and give me the codes? And I'm like, okay, James wouldn't do that. And when I actually click down at the email address, it's not actually James. It's actually someone who's managed to send an email with James as the name. And it's something we need to watch out for. And then there's human error and device loss. What we see as a common threat within non-for-profits, and I think this is aligned with industry standard, is that people often the weakest link here, that often we can have systems in place, that we can have advanced antivirus, we can have all these tools, but actually it's helping our team understand what may be a phishing scam, what may be a business email compromise. It's actually having that cyber hygiene that Jody touched on. It's actually not using the same password for every application, because as soon as one password is leaked or one third-party app that you're using is compromised, that password is then available on the dark net. But also what we're looking at is if we're using the same password for one application. So, often what happens is we don't want to pay for 10 licenses for Canva, for example. So we sneakily go and we use one Canva license for the 10 team members we have, but then we use the same password for Canva and we use the same password across all these different apps. But then one person leaves. Do we then need to remember we need to update the password each time across all those apps? So what we notice is that passwords get compromised not just by data leaks, but actually by people internally as well. But that also could be someone signing up to a Canva account, but actually using the same password that they use for all their personal accounts. If one of their personal accounts is used, like actually Stephen's been using the same password across all his accounts, let me just try his professional Canva one, and then they're hacked. So compromised passwords is what we see being a big pitfall here. So within our safeguards, we're looking at strong, unique passwords. We're looking at password managers here, LastPass being one, but there's many different ones available out there. We'll look at multi-factor authentication. If someone does have the password that actually they can't get in because they actually need that second SMS or that email with the specific code or the Authenticator app. We're looking at keeping backups and software updated. The more that the software is updated, the better, in the sense that out-of-date software may have compromises or may have vulnerabilities that the software providers then identified, and then they've pushed out a patch saying, okay, we've noticed that actually we've been compromised in this specific area, we're going to update our software. And it's very wise to keep those automatic software updates turned on, just so that you're up to date with the security enhancements that each developer is pushing out, as well as backups. So we talked on the previous page about ransomware, where they may put a malicious file on your computer. You can't actually access your files. You don't have a backup to it. You're then stuck because you can't access your files. It's been locked by another application. It's useful to have that backed up to the cloud, and should be in the cloud to begin with, just for that security principle there, for that secure environment. What we see as big is being staff training and appropriate access to applications, that not every staff member has access to every document within your organization or every client record within your CRM. And then as you become more advanced, thinking about your security audits, your risk reviews, and your policies. And I'm just putting some resources here, but these will be these are quite easy to access. So when it comes to cybersecurity and data privacy resources, I'd recommend the AICD and it's not Asia, but it's AISA, the Australian Information and Security Association, if I remember correctly. They've put out a good handbook when it comes to cybersecurity. The Australian Signals Directory does a good cybersecurity website for small to medium enterprises. So these are two good resources I'd check out if you're looking to just have a checklist and have a good start on cybersecurity. They cover a lot of the points we've already discussed. Those are the foundational ones. But yeah, it is, I think a key takeaway here is just investing in, again, it's a lot of investments in this conversation, but investing in the right training and helping your team have a culture of, is this cyber secure? The last part of our conversation before we go to the Q&A, and I hope I haven't killed anyone by death by PowerPoint, but is our CRM here. And I know this came up quite a bit in conversations and is quite a big thing when it comes to social enterprises, is understanding how we're tracking contacts. CRMs can be used in many different ways, but quite a common way is by tracking contacts within organizations. So my question to anyone who'd like to share is, how are you currently tracking contacts within your organization? If someone makes a donation or if someone attends an event, how are you currently tracking all information to do with Stephen, for example, if I was to be a member of your organization?
I can start probably because I'm probably a wonderful example of doing it badly. We started using Keela as a donor management system, and it has by default become our CRM, and it's not functioning well at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Keela is an interesting one then, Natalie, because it's purpose built for funding, is my understanding. My main experience has been with Salesforce, but in evaluating others, I remember Keela being specific for that function. But I think as we'll come to on different slides, the challenge it sounds like you're facing is you started with one product, but then you kind of outgrew it in a way.
It morphs into a solution for everything, which it's not. So I've been here for a year now, and I'm starting a project about 3 months ago to transition to an actual CRM rather than using a sheep to drive a car.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so I think what we're seeing within not-for-profits a lot is that contacts are stored in different data silos. So it happens too often where you approach a not-for-profit and you're saying, hey, let's say I'm a member of yours, where'd you get that information? So the member information, Stephen Hodgkin, is one row within an Excel sheet. Membership start date is column B, membership end date is column C. And then that's kind of it. And then maybe they'll have a few extra columns on information about me, maybe my address or maybe my email address, for example. And that's manually updated. So if you want to see who's expired, you kind of sort the expiry date list. If you want to see who joined, you kind of sort the joined list, first joined list. But it's quite messy because when it actually comes to, okay, where's the actual purchase from Stephen? Okay, that was in our Shopify. Okay, so actually, what events has Stephen attended? Oh, that's in our Humanitics. Okay, can you actually tell me, has Stephen attended many events? Actually, I've got to go into all these different apps to actually understand where that information is. And CRM matters. So for those of us who haven't heard what a CRM before, is a customer relationship manager. It's almost a database. I prefer the view of it looking at it as a database, is actually a way where we can centralize stakeholder details, whether that's for donors, whether that's for members, whether that's for clients, volunteers, partners, wherever that is, in one space. And what the key benefit, or one really big benefit, is being a single source of truth. So is that integration with MailChimp, integration with Shopify, integration with Humanitics, all these different areas where I can then kind of see the record for Stephen. There's Stephen's personal details, but then I can also look at if Stephen's a member, what events he's attended, what purchases he's made in our e-commerce, I can see if Stephen is a volunteer, for example, and then maybe I'm also looking at the compliance aspects of Stephen. Has Stephen got his first aid up to date? Has Stephen got his work with children check up to date for a not-for-profit that works in that space? So it's being able to see one key contact and then all the different relationships. And for any of us who are tech-minded, it's actually different databases here. So we may have a database that exists, as we saw before, with the simple Excel sheet which says Stephen Hodgkin, membership start date, membership end date. But then we have many, many different tables. We have a table for memberships. We have a table for first aid. We have a table for working with children check. And then these integrate well together within our CRM. With that, it helps us build better relationships with our stakeholders. So it means with volunteers, we're not keeping on asking them, hey, Stephen, have you got your first aid up to date? And I need to reply being yes or no. We can actually then be proactive. We can actually be automated with that. We can actually send Stephen an email 1 month before his working with children check is due to expire saying, hey, Stephen, your working children check is about to expire. You need to renew it. Here's some steps how to do it. Please note if you haven't done it, we can't have you working or volunteering with us until that is done, kind of thing. So it helps us maintain those relationships. It helps us understand our donors. If we have a donor within our organization, we actually want to know how much they've donated. We want to know when they first connected with us. It then helps us really appreciate what they're contributing. It helps us understand what their interests are. So with that, the better relationships, we have smarter decisions and reporting and better connection with our stakeholders. And with that, we're then looking at efficiency and growth because CRMs often bring with them a lot of automations. They help us connect with those automated emails being one example, but also may automatically bring data from Shopify into MailChimp or data from Shopify into different areas that we want to use them. So it's quite scalable. When it comes to CRM, it's worth, again, as we've talked about before, doing a needs assessment there. That needs assessment, that issue assessment is really, really important when it comes to understanding perhaps not just are we fixing one problem, but how can we fix multiple problems with the CRM? It may be that the CRM, in Natalie's example, may be good for donors, but actually, is there a way we can actually track other people within our organization? Can we track counselors, counselors as in members of the government council, the city council, who may be key stakeholders? Can we actually track more than donors? Can we actually track members? Can we actually track different stakeholders within our organization? There's going to be different budgeting and licensing costs for the different applications. It's how easy is that tool to use? I think it's almost worth separating the setup complexity to the ongoing complexity, because some may be really complex to set up. Salesforce is quite complex to set up, but when it's set up well, it's quite easy to use for the team. How customizable is it? How scalable is it? Again, depending on the license you get and the tier you get, some tools are natively more scalable than others, but also some subscription tiers won't let you have customizations unless you pay for an extra amount. And then integrations and support. And I think this is a really key one, is understanding, does this actually connect with MailChimp? Does this actually connect with is it connecting with my website? When I get a sign up on my website, is that actually coming into my CRM, or do I actually need to manually do that? Because that isn't always a given, especially as we look at different tools and different integrations. So when it comes to our best practices, we're trying to have a single source of truth and data hygiene, that we're looking for one place for the information relating to a stakeholder. We, as an organization, don't want to be opening so many different apps for it. We hope for it to natively integrate with our systems, data in, data out, working well. We want to be able to restrict sensitive data. We want to start with why quite early on. Why are we trying to get the CRM? Is it just for one area, or can we actually think about the broader teams and other teams that may integrate into this, and then thinking about automating where possible? And I think automation is key, especially within our context where we tend to be time poor. and as well within not-for-profits and social enterprises that take for granted volunteer hours. I think it's worth putting a dollar amount to a volunteer hour, because sometimes perhaps that's almost a whole different discussion, but I've seen too many times with the non-for-profits where it's like, oh yeah, actually we've got a volunteer who's managing our database, and we don't actually care about the automation there. Whereas actually, if you were to automate that, those volunteer hours could be spent elsewhere. So it's actually thinking about volunteer hours as money, as a donation, to actually quantify where your losses are and where you can have efficiency gains. In terms of a brief comparison, I'll be frank, my experience had mainly been to do with Salesforce. My business partner, James, is more to do with the CRMs here. I've only looked briefly at the whole ecosystem here. I haven't mentioned the more niche ones, like the one Natalie mentioned, where those tend to be more for donations or donors and don't tend to be more of a bigger CRM. But if we were to summarize the main players within the CRM space, you have Salesforce, which is a very powerful and very customizable solution. It's enterprise grade. It's very much the industry standard. And you have 10 free seats for non-for-profits, which is really powerful for AC&C registered non-for-profits. The problem or the barrier with Salesforce is just how costly it is. Some people prefer HubSpot, which is quite strong for marketing. It's quite user-friendly. You have Zoho, which is more affordable, it's flexible, and they have a business suite of applications. These last two, I wouldn't necessarily consider CRMs as such. I mean, Monday and ClickUp are both project management softwares that have turned into CRMs. They're great from a visual standpoint. I do think they offer strong CRM functionalities, but they won't be as powerful, customizable as your Salesforce. But for the team and for the right application, Monday and ClickUp can be both super powerful. And then we've come across organizations who will build within an Excel, a Notion, an Airtable, or Google Sheets. The barrier here is that you then, or the cost here, the true cost here, then you almost become a product owner. You almost become like you're developing a whole new product, because it takes quite a bit of time and resources to actually build that CRM, the different databases within Excel, within Airtable, or within Notion, or within Sheets. It's not natively built for that, but it is possible, so I thought I'd mention it. But it's not really best practice. It's not really recommended, just because it's recommended to have a strong understanding of how these databases work, and there's quite a bit of development to maintain them. And then just more on resources within the space. This is actually more tailored, not just to, I forgot to change security and data privacy, but more broader than just CRMs here, because this is pretty much the last slide of our presentation. Is Salesforce does have the non-for-profit success pack. We do have basic seats within Microsoft 365. We do have free seats within Google. Canva is also free for non-for-profits. We have Google Ad Grants. Raisely is a fee-free platform for non-for-profits. We have AWS Cloud Credits. And then a great place to start is Connecting Up. So Connecting Up is a place which is powered by Info Exchange, which gives not-for-profits access to discounted software and hardware. So if you're looking for a discounted laptop for your team, if you're looking for discounts on software subscriptions, Connecting Up is a great place to start. Info Exchange has a good digital transformation library. And then what I've briefly mentioned as well is, we're digital culture consultants, but we've also built our own app, which is supporting not-for-profits in the space. So we discussed password management there, ticketing, knowledge library, and a few other things there. So that's the end of the bulk of the slides. And I guess I'm opening up the discussion to the group and what questions you may have and what you may want to discuss.
Thank you, Stephen. That's awesome. I'll kick it off with a question if that's all right, because your last section about CRMs and data silos is so true. When I approach these sorts of things, usually I'll try and think about a way to automate those things myself. When I'm installing those automations in a small team, my concern is that when I don't have like any IT oversight or any like expert oversight, my concern is that I might be doing something ever so slightly wrong, or like I can have a crack at things, but yeah, I don't have any oversight. Is there any suggestions you have for that? Like when people are giving it a go, should I be reaching out, checking in, or what?
Yeah, no, that's a great point there, Rosie. I think for me, it is worth experimenting, but you don't want to experiment in a place where you actually, you're not in tech, you say production environment, you don't actually be in the space where client data is there. You don't want to be in the space that if you mess something up, you're actually messing up the whole way that your organization works, kind of thing. So it's actually experimenting in more of a contained little space, a sandbox. So for example, if it is HubSpot or Salesforce or Monday or whatever we're setting up, and we're thinking about automations, and we're actually thinking about perhaps send an automated email when someone signs up, I will actually go and create a free account, a trial subscription, and I'll actually be like, cool, let me try connect this in that way. Because when I accidentally set up the test email, it actually goes out to everyone in the client database. I know that in the test environments, that's just me, but in the actual environment, that's hundreds of people who might then be frustrated and be calling up and saying, "Why am I getting this email?" Blah, 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 blah. So I think having a test environment is powerful. I think something that's not to be underestimated here as we think about digital culture and how we're working is actually being conversational with AI tools. I know that's a buzzword here, but actually there's power in actually having conversations with, I mean, I view ChatGPT, or I view Gemini, or I view all these tools as almost like a university level student who has expertise across a range of domains, but is quite limited in their actual application or is prone to getting things wrong. So I'll have a conversation with, if I'm building a new area, I'm not too familiar with it, I'm not too sure how that'll turn out, I'll ask a question to ChatGPT and I'll be like, oh, this, and it'll kind of reinforce my knowledge or what I've kind of gotten from other sources. Be like, oh, have you tried this? I'm like, actually, that's worth trying. It may say, try that. And I try option B, but then it doesn't work. So I'll just go back to ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, look, option A worked, but option B just really didn't work. Can you try again? So my point being with the university level is that it's kind of studied all these different domains. It has this knowledge, but it's at the end of the day, AI is just maths and probability and statistics. It doesn't actually understand the true thing. So but it helps ideate and it helps source different information from the web, because when you're working with these tools, chances are someone's already asked the question, they've already asked it in the Salesforce support group, they've already asked in that space. You could do a Google, or you could have an AI system actually help you do the searching for you and bring that information to you. I hope that helps, Rosie.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you for those tips. Does anybody else in the group have any questions that came up? I've got more. I'll just jump in with this other question. Thinking about data security and making sure that our systems are safe, even though we are using Google Workspace, we have that level of security there. Should I be downloading a backup data copy of our CRM database or our other assets monthly or semi-regular basis just in case?
Yeah, so I think that monthly backup is worth it for access. You wouldn't want to lose access, one, or to have something go haywire with a third-party app. I think monthly is a good practice there. And then I'm thinking as well is you'd want to store that. Again, it depends on the organization and what the sub rules are, because different policies across different organizations. Some might say, hey, look, we're actually going to keep all backups within our Google Drive if you're using the Google Workspace. Some may say actually we're going to keep that offline and we're actually going to download that onto a separate storage device, and just in case Google Workspace also goes haywire. But then some people may see that storage in one specific offline storage as being a security risk. What does physical safety and physical storage look like there? But all of these applications will give you options to download your data, which is important to back up that data. There will be third-party applications to support that process, but I think that's almost a whole different point. I think it's worth consulting there just on workshops on how you get that data backed up in a secure way.
So Rosie, as well, just recently I did had to assist an organisation looking at their cyber insurance. And on their cyber insurance, actually, it was almost like a checklist. So a good way to know what to have is to understand your compliance against your cyber insurance policy, because otherwise, you won't be insured.
Interesting.
That's perfect, Jody. I think so. I've seen that exact same process for our organization as a social enterprise, with other social enterprise and not-for-profits too, is actually the insurance companies are going to charge you more for the more risk you have, which then, if you want to reduce your costs, you actually reduce your risk. And then I think almost pushing an organization to get cyber insurance is almost, for me, the great entry into having those cybersecurity conversations, because I don't think anything's important until they see the big quote for cyber insurance. And because the cyber insurance has said, oh, that's a risk, that's a risk, that's a risk, that's a risk, that's a risk. And your incentive is to reduce your cybersecurity insurance policy cost. And with that incentive, you're therefore going to reduce your risk. And as Jody said, they have checklists, and that's a great start.
Yeah. And I think I'm probably a really good example of your point around IT hiring, because I work as a consultant on CRM implementations, but because there's no IT knowledge, my business has absorbed a lot of IT questions and strategy in-house for some of these organizations because they don't have anyone else. And yes, reaching out to their IT managed service providers all well and good, but as I mentioned, that's only at a help desk level. They're not there from that strategy place. And so I'm shocked that it's as much as 50 hiring, but this is sort of what I alluded to, like, what do other people do? Because they're not employing a chief information officer because they're too small for that. They don't see tech as important, but at the end of the day, if you walk into the office or try and turn on your computer in the morning, there's no internet, or you've been hacked or what have you, what do you do? So it is, I love the term digital culture, and I did recommend this webinar to so many people and no one showed up, and I'm like, this is so distressing, because literally I see it every day. And I'm in positions with some organizations where I'm like, you guys need to hire someone. There's too many things. All of those business systems, someone does need to be responsible for them, because it is very hard when you're trying to do your day job and grow an organization at the same time. And you need to publicize this webinar.
I'm glad it's being recorded.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely. Yeah, honestly, because particularly people on the call that are in this very early days, you need to put the IT up on the highest priority before it gets out of hand. So I was going to mention, so the cyber insurance was that sort of checklist. And the other thing I sort of take away, so when you do look at all of those business systems, the other thing I've noticed is around vendor sprawl. So as you mentioned, suddenly you've got a Canva account and a this account and a that account, and things can get out of hand even there because you're signing up for things as Band-Aid fixes. So to your point around planning is so critical. I know it's weird when you don't know what you don't know, but again, it's where do you go to understand that?
Exactly. And as you said, it almost goes to the managed service provider who's not there for strategy, who's not there for that blueprint. And it's almost then, I imagine in your experience as you're sharing, is you're brought in for one project and it's like, oh, Jodie's in today. We'll actually ask her about this and that and this and that, which is outside the scope or not what you're brought on for. But we care about these organizations, so you'll answer it. But I think what we found helpful as we try to build self-sufficiency within these organizations is actually identifying digital champions within the team, is actually understanding who may have more of an inclination towards IT, who may actually have that interest, who's comfortable working with IT. Stereotypically, that tends to be the younger generation who's grown up with tech, but that's not always an assumption to be made. So it's actually working with the team in those conversations as you're building the tools. Are they comfortable with this? And then almost having them be the go-to, because I think when we think about ticketing or help desk within these not-for-profits, is actually making that self-sufficient at a team level and then an organization level. Because again, I've mentioned digital champions within an organization, but sometimes what ends up happening as well is you have one person within the organization, and then that person is just pestered with requests. It's just like, oh, hey, Seth, this is not working today. And Seth isn't IT. Seth is trying to do his operations job or whatever he's trying to do. And then he's then trying to solve all these things. So perhaps from a ticketing or help desk perspective, is this actually, how can the team solve it for themselves? If not the team, how can the organization solve it for themselves? If not the organization, then perhaps it's having that managed service provider who's actually more in tune, more strategically placed there. Because I think, as you mentioned, vendor sprawl there, Jody, something that perhaps it's not even related to the other points I mentioned, but with vendor sprawl is you actually see it's almost a negative that all these applications are free, because what you end up happening is having non-for-profit sign up, oh yeah, we'll get a Salesforce account, oh yeah, we'll get that account, so we'll get that account. And if there's no cohesiveness among the organization, you end up with every team using different softwares. Oh yeah, we're using the free version of Trello. Oh yeah, we're using Microsoft Planner. Oh yeah, we're using ClickUp. Oh yeah, we're using this. You end up with a sprawl across teams, but then also within the organization. As we're small and only maybe 1 or 2 employees, we use Salesforce for this specific niche idea, not realizing that actually Salesforce can be extended to the whole organization with the right customization and the right setup. Yeah, sorry, I could rant about this for ages, but yeah.
I think, Jody, I was just going to jump in as well and say, Jody, you're totally right. It sort of we had thought about doing this workshop in 2 formats, and it strikes me that people think of it as someone else's job to do, like it's like finance and accounting or IT and tech, or they're like, it's a service. It isn't something that's around communication or community building or actually delivering like a service to vulnerable cohorts, which a lot of our enterprises work with. But I think actually we're doing quite a bit of work on an incubator at the moment, and it makes me think that we should probably, these are should be your fundamentals when you're setting up your organization. And as you say, Stephen, having a champion on board would be at the beginning is great. You're totally right. Like, we've got 1 million platforms at the minute. I'd say we were pretty savvy, but we got all the passwords in a Word doc. We've got all the platforms.
But it's making me think that,
like, we've got a CRM that's driving us crazy.
I feel like on your points about digital culture and like upskilling everyone in the team to have better digital literacy and hygiene, it kind of makes me feel like, all right, I've identified a gap that I'd like to upskill in. Do you have any suggestions? Are there any like 1-day workshops, or is there anything that Zentient provides that you think we or small social enterprises could do to kind of upskill our team in that general way? Because it sounds like a really in-demand skill that we should all have, not just one person, but our whole team.
Yeah, I think the digital skills is a really interesting area there, Rosie. And I think, James and I have identified this as well. And I think trying to build a product, and my Zentient's like one idea there is actually that skills capturing is actually having within the organization, understanding every team member and then understanding what competency they have on each of the tools. And then thinking about how we can strategically upskill each of those people across specific tools and across teams, so that we may identify within a specific team there's actually a lack of digital capabilities there. So how can we invest for them to get that upskilling? I think there's a lot of great online courses, and I think there's an encouragement for staff to do their own training there, for them to perhaps invest. Coursera and edX are great places where I've explored. Jackie's mentioning LinkedIn Learning. But then there might be something that we want to align ourselves organization-wide, and then that might be bringing in a consultant or whoever to do a workshop we get brought in quite often to work with the team and workshop with the team. Last week was an example of an AI one where the team wanted to centralize how they're working with AI across the organization. And it's not just thinking about tools, but again, that digital culture. Are we actually being responsible with our data? Are we actually thinking about ways that AI can be used? Are we just using it as a glorified search engine, or actually are we thinking about how it could actually integrate into our workflows a bit more? So yeah, I think there are interesting ways where, one, you capture that information and you can actually strategically look at your team. Two, encouraging that self-learning and that self-development, and perhaps paying for courses, allowing them to pick a course and do that. Or if there is that need for a team-wide one, is bringing in proper workshops there.
Peter, did you have a comment as well? You took yourself off.
I did. So Steve, you put all this together for companies. Yeah, you kind of hold their hand and connect the dots.
That's what we try doing. Yeah, Peter, is not we implement. So we look at more digital culture and strategy, but then also implementation. So we may come alongside a certain organization working with their budgets and saying, okay, actually within your budget it would be more looking at blueprints, and perhaps if the blueprint says we need to do A, B, and C, maybe you could do A and B internally, and we come in for C. Perhaps we do A and you do B and C, or maybe we do A, B, and C. But for us, it's I like your analogy there. Is we try to connect the dots as we understand where the business is going, and then actually what processes and tools may support the business. And importantly, it's not just for us, it's not just tools, because certain organizations, especially within social impact and non-for-profits, don't like technology. They're resistant to technology. And instead of trying to force people who are uncomfortable with technology to try adopt tech, is actually trying to meet them where they are. So there was one example where the educators we're working with really love handwritten notes, and some of us may actually appreciate handwritten notes. For some of us, there's actually studies that show that handwritten notes help you remember things better. They don't like typing. They don't want to carry a laptop or an iPad around with them. They want to have a clipboard and just be able to write as they're working. And they were like, well, there's this push to digitize everything. But then we were actually thinking, if we're thinking of a digital culture mindset, it's actually, how can the tools support this person? How can we keep them using the checkboard or the pen and paper, but actually maybe have optical character recognition, an OCR, a tool that kind of reads the handwriting and then puts into a database kind of thing. It won't be perfect, but actually captures what we need. So I think that's an important one there. It's just, again, when we're working with our team, it's not trying to force them into things they're uncomfortable with. It's trying to nudge in certain ways, but actually meet them where they are as well.
I don't know if it's worth saying, Stephen, as well, is that we're having a chat with Zentient about how they might support our membership on sort of one-to-one and bespoke projects or challenges you have. So I don't know if that's sort of maybe what you were also asking about, Peter. If you've got beyond this workshop today, other things that they can help with, that's what we'd love to offer.
Indeed. Yeah, thanks, Olivia. I think that's a big part of our mission. Is we have done a lot of pro bono consulting, and we're seeking to promote that with WASEC, is actually come alongside WASEC members and support you guys, because that's been our mission as a social enterprise, is to make this more accessible, to not gatekeep tech consulting and these tech expertise behind big paywalls, is to actually make that accessible and actually help strategize that to be self-sufficient. And if you need that tech expertise, and perhaps we can actually pinpoint you to, actually there's university clubs who may be able to help with some strategy. Actually, there might be other grants that you're applicable for, and it doesn't actually have to be Zentient at the end of the day either. It can actually be many other people who could plug into that.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. We've gone over a little bit, so I'll wrap it. Wow, there's a lot of content in there that I found extremely helpful, and thank you so much for presenting on this today, and hopefully we can do another event with you in the future. Yeah, and thank you so much everyone for joining and contributing such interesting questions and conversations. Yeah, I'm looking forward to putting this information together and sharing out a resource with all of us. And yeah, thank you. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your days, everyone.
Thanks, Rosie. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.